Welcome everyone to Charles Davis. How was
Very
that for an
good.
intro, Charles?
Oh, you nailed it.
Apart from the phone ringing.
That's all right. And you just need your kid to run in here now and you'll be fine.
No, they're gone. I got rid of them.
All right. Well, I might jump straight to my little slideshow, I think.
Yep. It's like in the old film days, mate, when people would come back from a holiday and we're having slide night.
Oh, you've disabled me, Chris.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
I can't share my screen.
Let me just fix that now. There we go. You should be good to go now.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
I've just got some other people in the room. I'm just going to let them in.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep, we can see it fine.
So, as Chris said, I live in the Snowy Mountains. I live just outside of a town called Cooma. So I'm about 14 kilometers out. And I'm 6th generation on this farm and I'm 7th just up the road from where my mother is. So that means I just can't date anyone from the local area because we are all related. It's that awkward. Yeah, so this was taken on the family farm. So we do get snow maybe 4 or 5 days a year. It doesn't stick around for very long, but when it happens, it's pretty dramatic. And it is a working sheep farm, as you can see. There's some sheep in there. But yeah, half the farm is actually just bush and it's untouched river country that my grandmother bought for $1 an acre back in the day. She bought it just because she liked the lyrebirds. So I come from a family of artists. So my grandfather was a painter, my aunts are painters, my sister is, and then a bunch of scientists as well. We have 7 science degrees in the family and 3 PhDs. And then obviously growing up in Cooma, if you want to be a cool kid, you have to snowboard. So in high school, I got into snowboarding in a big way, and that's all my mind was focused on. Snowboarding. And then I started competing when I was 16 and then started traveling around the world, competing in snowboard competitions, hurting myself in every country I could think of. And after a while, that kind of wore out and my body hurt too much and I started taking photos and all that sort of hunting and skiing and the science background, the arty background, they all just sort of amalgamated into me starting to do wildlife photography. And then people just started wanting to buy my photos. And it got to a stage where I was making more money selling photos than I was doing my current job. So I just started doing it full time and I haven't looked back since. So this is also my farm when it's not covered in snow. This is just from the top of the valley looking out, and everything the light touches is our property. It's a bit of Lion King theme going on. But Chris suggested that I should pull up Google Earth here for a second, and then I can give you a real look at what's going on. Show you where I live. So just bear with. Can everyone see that?
Yes, perfect, mate. Yep.
So it's good for me to show you this because it's kind of hard to get a scale of where it is I live and how far I travel each day. So this here is Cooma. This is the ACT in Canberra right here. And then this funny looking shape here looks a little bit like Texas. That's our family farm. And that's my house just there. And then all this is the river country, all through here. So any crazy projects I have, I'll just go in there and I'm quite happy to put $10,000 in a tree and just leave it for a few months and not worry about anyone taking it, which is a nice thing. So most days I drive back into Cooma, which is about 14 kilometers. And then I head out either to the north side of the park, which is over here, or back down here where Perisher and Thredbo and the big resorts are. And I watch the weather reports really closely. So I look at how much snow is going to come in, what the temperature is going to be, where the wind's coming from, and then I sort of pick which areas I'm going to go to on that day for particular wildlife that I might be after. And I look at how low the snow is going to go to figure out which animals I might be able to get. So if it's snowing up really high, I can only sort of go for animals like wombats and, you know, the odd birds like rosellas and ravens. But if it snows down really low, then I can go after everything. And then it's kind of playing each day on the fly, basically. So it's a lot of driving. It's about, probably drive about 3 hours a day. So if you do multiple days, it really knocks you around. And I had to have the last 2 days off because, yeah, just the body was not terribly happy about it all. Yeah, so I might.
So Charles, does that change what gear you take out? So do you see this weather, you look at the weather report before you go, so you're not taking too much gear, or do you wait till you just get to location?
So I usually pack as much gear in the truck as I can. I have my standard gear that I usually use each day. So we can go into gear right now if you'd like. So the gear is, I know a lot of people say gear is not important, and, you know, often it's kind of not, but when it comes to snow, the gear is very important, because if you haven't got the right gear, you're just going to suffer really badly out there. And the better your gear is, the better you're going to function. So every day when I go out, I tend to wear roughly the same things. So I always wear one of these hoodies that kind of goes into a balaclava, and I can ninja up pretty quick. Always wear a vest. And then my jackets go in different temperatures. So I've got a different jacket for every sort of climate. But generally I'll wear this thing, which is about as thick as a Woolworths shopping bag. And I'll wear that under my vest, and it just lets me breathe while I'm hiking. And then on top of that, everything green. It's very handy. I'll wear another Gore-Tex layer, and it's super thin as well. So I don't really wear a lot of big puffy layers. I wear a lot of thin layers, and then I can take them off as I get hotter, because the last thing you want to do is sweat. And then if it's a really cold day and I'm dealing with things that eyesight isn't really an issue, like wombats and echidnas, then I'll get the big jacket out, which is a little bit warmer. But it's also Gore-Tex, and it also breathes really well, and it all packs down really small. So things that I can really compress and fit into my bag, so I can bring more camera gear and less clothes. And then my other gear, so this is my bag. It's a, you know, standard f-stop. I think it's a Loka. And in the top, every day I take out sunnies, because it gets incredibly bright out there, and the bigger the sunnies, the better. So I'll wear these big boys. They're a little bit like goggles, but they let you breathe a bit. And then when the weather gets really harsh, I've got even bigger goggles, which just keep your face warm as well. They're pretty handy. And then always got a head torch, because sometimes you're stuck out there. So, you know, sometimes you'll find an animal and you'll be 10 kilometers out on your skis, and you'll stay till sunset, and then you'll be skiing home in the dark. So it's good to always have a torch. This little thing is incredibly handy. This is a monocular, because the binoculars are too heavy. So this is another brand, which I won't say on here, but it's very small and very light. So that's very handy to take out, and it's about the equivalent of a 400mm lens, yeah, on a full frame body. Other things that are very important to me, a bag of lolly snakes, as I am a diabetic, so I run on sugar. Hand warmers, these things are just fantastic. I don't know why I didn't use them all the other years, but now I buy them in bulk and I put them in. They last about 6 hours, and they just change your entire day. And then from there, in the top of my bag, I've got another balaclava, thinner gloves, bigger gloves, a spare pair of bigger gloves because the first pair will always get wet and then you want to swap them. And then the ICU that I've got in this bag is a large, so I've always got enough room that I can stuff a jacket in on top. So you always want to have enough room in your bag that you can pack all the layers that you're wearing into it and not have them hanging off you, which is also important.
That terminology ICU refers to F-stop's internal compartment, the ICU, not intensive care unit.
No. And then, so the last few years I've kind of really refined my camera gear to just being 3 lenses, 2 bodies. So you can see how they all just fit in there. So they fit to a mil in this ICU in here. So there's not much room at all, but they fit perfectly. So the first one I've got is, so both my cameras are Nikon D850s. And then this is a 500mm f5.6. And then I've got different lens caps. And the main reason I've got these is, one, they're soft and I can shove them in my pocket and not worry about them breaking or anything. But 2, I can put them on over the top of the lens hood. So the lens hoods are always on. And then that way when I pop it out, I can pull that off. Lens hood's already on. I don't have to worry about snow getting on my lens. And I'm just good to go. And I put that in the bag with the lens hood on all the time. And this lens that's just changed my entire world. It weighs as much as my 70-200 and is tack sharp. And yeah, I thought the 5.6 might be a problem, but it's not an issue at all. And then the other one is another D850 and a 70-200.
Hey, Charles, can you just, a question in the chat here, can you just stop sharing your screen just so we can see a larger version of you?
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
No. The map's cool and all, but I think you're prettier.
Yeah. Is that doing the thing now?
That's perfect. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
Hold that up again. There we go. So I have these, they're a neoprene fabric that I put over the top of my lenses. And it's not because I want to cover up Nikon's lovely branding or anything, but it's the main thing is I just beat these lenses within an inch of their lives. I smack them into trees, I put them on rocks, and they get really wet a lot of the time. All my gear gets really wet. I'll have to put it in front of the fire every night to let it dry out. And also it gets really cold. So this is really nice to hold on to. It's not cold metal or plastic. And yeah, I can whop it into things. Not a problem in the world when you want to go and resell your gear. That's a good thing to do. And then the last one is 24-70 f2.8. Now the reason I don't have this one on a body is it's kind of a wildlife logic for me. So I've always got the 500mm set to go straight away, because when you first see an animal, it's usually going to be taking off really quickly. So both my bodies are set to aperture priority. They're both set to ISO 800 and f5.6 with this lens. And then I've got the exposure set to just be a stop over. So what I'm trying to do is expose for the snow. So if I see a critter, this one comes out, it's good to go. If the critter stays, well, if it stays, then you've got time to get the wide angle out. You're going to have time to put it on a new body. And if it's that close that you can get in with an ultra wide, then, you know, you're good to go. So you've got all the time in the world to play around with the wide angle.
Can we just stop on a couple of things there, Charles?
Yeah.
So you exposed for the snow?
I do. So yeah, I don't ever expose for the animal. I only expose for the snow. So if you get the snow right, you want to get the snow as close as you can to clipping the highlights. You want it to be white. And this is for cloudy days, principally. If the sun's out, putting on aperture priority is just not going to work for you, because you're going to have reflections pumping off everywhere. It's going to be insane. But on a cloudy day, it just becomes a blank level template. And if you expose for white, then everything else becomes exposed as well.
Right.
And if you just have like a wombat, which is quite dark in a total white setting, it's incredibly hard to try and expose for that. So if you get the snow right, you'll get the animals right. And then it gives you a lot less to think about.
So is that potentially why you shoot aperture priority instead of shutter priority?
Yeah, principally, because I want to get the aperture right. I want that look. So, you know, if I'm going for more of a landscape, then I'm going to jack up the aperture to, you know, f8, f10 to get more details in there. Or if I just want it to look a bit more portraity, I'm going to drop it down to f2.8 with the other lenses and just try and go for the look rather than worrying about the exposure. And generally, like when it's cloudy, you're always going to be shooting at 1/1600th of a second in snow, because there's so much light bouncing around. So I'm not generally worried about having a slow shutter speed. And then every now and then I'll always check the image and I'll make sure it's sharp, and I'll check what the shutter speed is. And if the shutter speed's running low, then I'll jack up the ISO. And I'm quite happy to jack up the ISO all the way up to 5,000, or even last year I jacked it up to 25,000 shooting crocodiles eating bats with National Geographic. And the Nikon cameras can handle it. And I'm more concerned about getting the image than worrying about grain, which I think too many people worry about. Yeah.
Some would argue that if you're photographing birds, wildlife, things that are moving, that perhaps putting the camera into shutter priority is your first priority, where you're making sure you're freezing the action, but you're more concerned about exposing correctly first of all.
Yeah, I'm not worried, because I shoot in the same sort of light so often. I know what the shutter speed is going to come out as. So it's not so much of an issue worrying about getting a blurry image, because you know it's going to be sharp most of the time. And if it's getting really dark, so once it starts snowing really heavily, it can get very dark, and then I'll know to jack up the ISO to 4,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
And another handy tip is, if it's snowing really hard, and the idea of putting your ISO to 4,000 would make some people cringe, is that snowflakes and rain look an awful lot like grain, and you can disguise that really easy. And you can still win awards with ISO 5,000 images in a snowstorm, and no one will know the better.
Because you've done that, right?
Because I've done that.
It's why I love doing these things, these talks, because we get a whole heap of different photographers who all shoot differently, but they all come up with incredible imagery. And it's wonderful to know that there are rules, there are ways that we can particularly try and shoot under different circumstances. But if that rule doesn't suit you, then set up the rule that does, which is exactly what you've done.
You should never let rules hold you back. You should never let what YouTube tells you hold you back. It's art, and it's about getting something that you're happy with, not what other people are going to be happy with. So yeah, it's just about getting the shot, really. And my style is very fast. It's very gritty, but it's very natural as well. I don't try to hoodwink anyone. I don't try to disguise anything. I don't try to make something up. I go out and I see what I see, and I capture what I see, and I share exactly as it was. So that's the main thing for me. Yeah.
And the lens covers, do you make them yourself?
No, so a company called Lenscoat in the States makes them, and they're doing a roaring trade in face masks at the moment. Other things I have, Cliff Bars. Always got a lot of Cliff Bars. These things are good. They keep me going for about 2 hours a bar. They're a bit expensive, but that's all right. And other things I take with me are, depending on the things. So this thing's for dingoes. It is not a sex toy. Well, could be, but anyway, this sounds like a dying hair. So it's great for dingoes and foxes. Chris loves it. I also have other things in my pocket. So I'll have Always have a few lens cloths. I've got a fox whistle. This sounds like a dying rabbit. This will bring in eagles, ravens, hawks, foxes, dingoes, quolls, cats, you name it. Anything that eats bunnies. Weird things to have in your pockets. And then for me, I've always got a blood tester. These things are useless. They just seem to work in nursing homes and they don't work in the cold very well. So I have another heat pack that goes in my pocket to keep that going. And then I have my insulin. This also looks like a sex toy, but it's not. I've taken that up with Diabetes Australia, but they won't listen. Literally looks like a vibrator or something. Lens pen. Always got a lens pen. These things are fantastic. I don't carry around a blower. The little squiffy brushes, they're really good. And then if you get a big smudge, yeah, it's got a little doodadder. So if you never use them, they're really good. And then spare batteries in the bag as well, and a little case with spare memory cards. So I always shoot to 2 memory cards at a time, and they just back each other up. And what else are we talking about?
Shooting raw.
Always shooting raw. So when I first started, the first camera I bought a Nikon D90, and I bought 2 lenses off a snowboard photographer mate called Phil Tifo. And Tifo was a bit cagey about giving me any advice, but he did give me a few tips, and he said, always shoot raw, always shoot manual, and take a shitload of photos. And I have stuck with that philosophy ever since. And it has got me through. And it was really hard to begin with, but you know, the main principle with me with having a DSLR is get onto manual, shoot everything you can on manual, shoot everything raw. And even though you might not be able to edit your photos very well now, you can come back, and I do come back to an image 5 years later and go, oh, I learned a new technique. I can totally revamp this entire image and then go on and try and sell that.
That's great advice.
Yeah, it's pretty solid.
So with all that gear, how far do you normally trek in a day?
I will trek anywhere from 200 meters to 20 kilometers. So my other equipment that I use to go out. So if I'm just going out of the car, because sometimes bag's trying to escape on me. Sometimes you don't actually go that far from the car. You might just drive along and you'll see something, but then you're going to have to jump straight into the snow. So I wear these things. They're called muck boots. These ones are made for Canada, so they're made for like -20. So they're waterproof all the way to the top, which is great if you go jumping in a creek or standing in a creek, which I often do, or if you just fall into a great big hole. So they're really handy. But then if I start skiing, so I ski on my snowboard. So my snowboard splits in half into skis, and I'll show you that in a second. It's a really weird thing if you've never seen it. It's called a split board. But my snowboard boots, they're pretty chunky, but they're a lot more comfortable than a ski boot, which is hard and just doesn't conform at all. So these things are really comfortable to be in all day, and I can get out, run around in these, and come back to the skis and still be quite comfortable. So the split board. So this is my snowboard. It's made by my mate in Canada. He makes his own. And basically what you do is you've got your bindings on here, and you can just clip that. Or you should probably stop sharing screens again. I'm going to do this. Is that better?
Yep, that's better. Yep. Yeah.
So you've got your bindings on there. You've got little things, and you can pop that, and then you can slide the whole thing off, which might be a little bit hard to do right here. So that comes off. And then we've got another one. So the bindings help keep it together. It's a bit of a mission to do in your office. It's a lot easier on snow. That comes off. Then we've got 2 little clips on the top, more little clips. And then your snowboard splits in half, you cross them over, and then they're skis. So the bindings get back on pretty easily. They just slide onto these little pucks here.
So for uneducated non-snow people, the benefit of having skis and snowboards is snowboard goes downhill and skis go flat and uphill. Is that?
Yeah.
Is that right?
So now it's a ski, and the snowboard bindings are pretty basic things. They're just two straps that just lock your boot in. And then the advantage of this is it pivots on the toe there. So you can kick forward and go uphill. So the other thing that goes on is these sticky mohair skins. They're like a stick-it note, and you stick them on the base of the ski, and then they allow me to ski up the hill. So you kick forward, it grips, and you can just ski right up the hill.
Yeah, well.
It's incredibly fast. Yeah, you can go up some very steep stuff. And then you take them off, put it back into a snowboard. I'm a much better snowboarder than I am skier, and then I'll snowboard back down. And then also have poles, and my poles compress up. Everything I've got, you know, you want to be nice and small. And they give you a lot of stability as well. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's the split board. It's weird, but yeah, most of the photos I take are with that. Actually, both these photos behind me on the magazine covers, both taken while standing on my split board. So yeah, very handy. We'll go back to screen sharing.
I don't need much of that equipment up on the Gold Coast, mate.
Oh, you could try. You could exercise.
Actually, whilst you're getting that, so what sort of noise does that create, and does it scare the animals, or do you have to be conscious of that?
Yeah, it's tricky. It's advantage of shooting in a blizzard. Quiet. Of snowflakes falling down all at the same time, and it just
Is that just yeah, that's Charles's frozen, which is probably an apt term for somebody that lives in the snow. Oh, we got you back now, mate?
Yeah, sorry, we dropped out there, I think.
Yeah.
That's
I think you're good now.
Sorry, I live on a farm and the NBN doesn't like me.
All right, so let's move into some photos. So this is you showing off?
Yeah, so this is when I used to think I was cool, and I liked bright colors. That was back in the day. And this is my office. So this little area is called Little Austria. So most people know the resorts as being quite flat in Australia, but that's on the eastern side of the main range. If you go to the west, everything gets very dramatic very quickly. So this is taken out of my dad's plane, and he'll take me up after a big snowfall, and we'll go buzz around the mountains and take photos out of the plane. I bought a special door for it so I can shoot out of it. So I just got a little hatch that flops down in the window, and then I can just shoot out. And when I'm doing aerials, I always use this 28 to 300mm Nikon. This is the most underrated best lens that Nikon makes, I reckon. It is just an absolute gem. This lens has made me more money than any other lens I own, and it only costs like $1,300 or $1,200 bucks.
Something like that. Yep.
Yeah, it's just such a sharp, amazing, flexible lens. And, you know, 28mm is very wide, 300mm is fantastic. So very handy. Always take your lens hood off when you're shooting out of an airplane, or you won't have a lens hood at the end of it. Learned that the hard way. Oh, I do have those skins here, but I don't need to show you that now. So my photographic journey. This photo here is by no means, it's not an award-winning image. it's not an image that I really share, but this is the day when it all clicked in my head. So I think most people can probably relate to that. We still got connection? Yeah.
Yep, still going. Yep.
Yeah, so I was like most people. I was going out just randomly, just shooting anything that came across my path. And I was driving to Canberra back and forth every day, going to uni. And I saw all these little kestrels. This is a kestrel. It's a type of falcon that we have in Australia. It's called a Nankeen kestrel. They eat everything: snakes, lizards, mice, other birds. Fantastic. And these ones had just come out of the nest, and it was a day. So they only come out of the nest for about 3 days, and they start doing a thing called branching, where they're starting to learn how to fly. And there was a big storm cloud behind it. The sun was setting, the light was coming in. And I finally realized that, it wasn't so much just going out and just hoping to find a subject or something like that. It was having to team up a really special animal event with amazing weather and amazing light. And all those things, if you brought them together, you would just, every time, just get amazing images. So from this point onwards, that's all I was directed towards, was going, where are the animals? Is there going to be weather? And the worse the weather, the better. And that was going to make dramatic things. So my grandfather always told me that an image had to have, for him it was paintings, but it always had to have 3 elements. So it had to have good light, had to have an amazing subject, and then it had to have emotion. So this was the next image that I sort of tied it together. And this was my first big award-winning image. So this is called Praise to the Rain. So I sat in the rain for 3 hours trying to get these kangaroos. And I felt pretty much like that little one just to the right there, just soaking wet, miserable. But it was just about isolating those 2 young bucks there that were just kind of jousting with each other, just playing around and just trying to get that. And this is a special image for me because another thing my grandfather always said was you need leading lions in your image as well. So I have the airstrip. This is down at a place called Gehi, which is an old Snowy Hydro airstrip. So you have the airstrip kind of leading off into the distance there, and you can only just subtly see it. You don't really look at it, but your brain sees it and likes it. And then there's symmetry between the 2 big males there. And that symmetry I could never recreate. That shape just between them is near perfect. And then the other joey, it balances it out. And then the rain coming in just makes it. So I turn a lot of my photos black and white as well because it's such a monochrome environment. And once you turn them black and white, you can really bring out those snowflakes and the hair and the trees and things like that. But when you go to color with the snow images, you'll lose a lot of that detail in the trees because of the foliage and things like that. So it's often a lot easier just to turn snow images black and white. This image was taken with this lens. This is all I took out the day I took it. And I've never seen kangaroos to this day in snow that deep. They were in such deep snow that they couldn't even hop. They were seriously stuck. And as horrible as that sounds, it did make for some really amazing images. So I was able to get quite close to them. But on that same day, I got all different sorts of images because I was using that 28-300. So, I took a nice wide one before, and then this big male, I had to zoom in because he would have clawed my eyes out if I got closer. And then same day, using the wide and going back to the black and white, there was stacks of brumbies out there. And then again, leading lines, Thredbo River, and then you can see in the mountains up the background, there's just a raging blizzard going on. And then also from about a minute before that, just zoomed in. So when you have a really amazing day, you can just clean up on the images. But I think a lot of people don't realize about what I do is I only get a handful of days every year where I can actually take really good photos. And I might only get 5 or 6 days at most that I can take really amazing images. So if the sun's out or it's raining or things like that, the photos are just going to be rubbish. So this valley here especially, you can see how deep the snow is there, but normally it's just grass. And there's only a handful of days in a season where the snow is that deep in there. So this was a 1 in 15 year blizzard. And I pretty much lived off that day for about 3 years, I reckon. Just the photos I took that one day.
Can you define that again, Charles? You said that the weather has to be great, but often the bad weather creates a great image and creates drama in your image.
Sorry, when I say great, I mean horrible. Like,
yes,
the weather has to be as foul as possible. There has to be 100-kilometre-an-hour winds. There has to be snow coming in sideways. And a really good sign of that is when you're driving into the national park and there is a stream of traffic heading the other way, getting away from it, you are on point. So a good thing to remember with your images that I learned early on is that people want to see what they haven't seen. And if you're going to show them what they haven't seen, then that's going to be the days when they're inside, next to the fire, warm, happy. So if you go out on the days that you would rather be inside, you'll get photos that will amaze people. And Gertie and Carol know that because I took them out of full-on blizzard and we got amazing photos. Because as soon as you go out in just shocking weather, you get these amazing things happening, things that you'd never seen before, and anything can happen. You get crazy winds and snow and clouds and all sorts of drama, beautiful shapes. And the thing with snow is something that looked really boring, like that road I showed you at the start, which looks absolutely just boring as batshit every other day of the year. That one day for 5 minutes looked glorious. And that's one of my best-selling images.
Oh, wow.
So this is me at work. This is the general look of things. I was using a tripod this day, which I never actually use. I'm always shooting freehand because I just need my gear to be loose. I need my hands to be loose. I need to generally be holding onto my poles as well. So I'll have them in one hand. And things just happen too quickly to be setting up a tripod. You tend to scare things off. But this is when I was shooting for 7 Worlds, One Planet for David Attenborough. And I shot half the kangaroo sequence on the day at 50 there, which you wouldn't think would be a cinematographer camera, but you know, that day it did the job and the BBC was quite happy about it. And yeah, it's good. Yeah, so this is me at work again. Try to blend in as much as possible. I tend to describe myself as professionally creepy. It's all right, I've got a girlfriend, so I can say those things now and not try and impress anyone. Another thing that I changed with my cameras is I took the neck straps off them because I found I was hooking it on things a lot because I'm generally in stuff like this where it's just really thick scrub and it gets quite cumbersome. So I do have these little hand straps and I'll use those as kind of protection to keep my gear. So yeah, I try to just slimline things as much as possible, lower the weight, and just make things as quick and functional as I can. So I did have a gallery for a little bit, and it was just a pop-up gallery. It went really well, and I think that was a big step in my career, is having a gallery. And printing photos is a massive thing as well. If you've never printed any of your images, you need to do that, and you need to print them big, like real big. So big you feel like you can just walk into them. Then you'll really, really learn to appreciate your images, and other people will as well. So before this, I only had images online and people didn't really get to see them, and my sales weren't really that massive. But once I started printing images, there's a big step between seeing something online and seeing something on a wall in a real space where it's a tangible, real item. And then it enters a whole new realm and people will go, oh, it's real. I can actually buy that. So that was a big step. I was going to open another gallery this year, but then the Rona kicked in and I just went, no, I'll step back from that. So I'm still selling online. this image, a lot of you will know, and it's called Guthiga Wombat, but I refer to it as That Bloody Wombat. This is my best-selling image of all time, so it's sold out now. I had 100 prints of it, and I've sold every single one of them, except one, which I kept for myself. But you're gonna have to offer me a good price for that. So this day, this was the first day it actually clicked with me about wombats. Before that, it was all quite random. So I saw this wombat from the other side of the valley, from the other side of the Snowy River, and all I could see was a black lump of a rock with footsteps behind it. And that's what I look for now, is I look for rocks with footsteps behind them. Because if you try to pick a wombat from a rock or a bush, you're not going to do it. They just look like a rock every time. So I saw him, and I saw him moving along, and I put my skis on, and I went straight down, waded through the river, got quite wet feet, skied up the other side, rushed like crazy to get into position, laid down in the snow, waited 45 minutes for him to come towards me. He came up, he sniffed me, he didn't give a stuff, and then he just walked around me, stepped over my legs, and went and ate some grass. And I went, oh, all that preparation, all that rushing just wasn't really necessary. He just didn't really care. So I spent most of the afternoon with this one wombat, and I took a lot of photos. I can't remember exactly how many photos, but I took a lot. And it wasn't until later in the day that the clouds sort of came over and it started snowing a little bit. You can see there's a few little snowflakes coming down here. And once you had that cloud cover over it, just acted like a big softbox. And then you got light on that shadowy side, and then you had light on the other side, and it just made everything a lot better. So this image here, I actually took with a 50mm prime lens. And at that stage, I was just really keen on portrait lenses, and I was taking a 24mm, 50mm, and a 105mm lens out. And I was just kind of trying to play with shooting wildlife like you would shoot a fashion set, really, or a wedding. And yeah, it worked out really well. I've gone out and done that a few times. I've gone out and just taken the 24mm for the whole day and just worked on taking photos just with a 24mm prime, which is unheard of for wildlife, but it's, I recommend it. Just take a prime lens out and just test yourself. It's a good thing to do. So this one here, I'm lying down and I just let him walk towards me. And the big thing with wombats is you can let them walk towards you to a point, and then you need to get out of the way, because wombats will just walk through anything. If they know they can go through it, they will go through it. If they can't go through it, they'll bite it. And if it is you, I don't recommend getting bitten, because they've got some very good little chompers on them. Yeah.
So Charles, there would have been a sequence of this image.
There is a sequence.
The standout?
This was the standout, yeah. So the thing that it really went with this image was I had a little bit of a leading line coming in from the left there, which really just led down to his paw, and just where he had his paw just had all that more expression in it. And his whole weight was just thrown towards his shadow, which leads you out to the side there. So I'm really big on vacant space in my images as well. I like to leave a lot of vacant space. And with my images, I really like to tell a story. The thing I really reel against is just a bird on a stick or just a really tight portrait. I do it sometimes, and and they do get a lot of likes, but I would much rather tell a story like this one. And, you can kind of see where he's come from. You can get a sense of where he's going. You can get a sense of the environment around him. You can see some plants. You can see they're all covered up. You can see off into the distance. You can see the valley is just full of snow falling. It just adds so much more to an image. And every animal is different. They all have character. They all have a story. And when it comes to selling an image, it's really good if you can have the people look at it and sort of create their own story in their head. And it happens all the time. They'll make names up for the animals. They'll say where he's been. They'll say where he's going. And if you can get that with your image, you're on point. You know, you want people to stop and look at it. You don't want them just to get it straight away. Yeah.
So to me, it looks like you've shot this for an editorial or for publication. As you've become more published over time, have you shot with the idea that there would be some text in this image?
No, actually, I never shoot with the publication in mind. I think I'm quite proud of that. I also don't shoot images that I think other people want. I just take the photos that I want to take, and I take them the way I want them to look. And if people like them, that's a win. And if people don't like them, then that's all right, because I like them. That's fine. But as you can see with the wombat behind me, with the front cover on the Australian Geographic, they did crop it into a portrait. But I guess the strength of this image is that you can turn it into a portrait, you could turn it into a pano, you could turn it into a 2x3 crop, and it still works. And I'd put that more down to the lighting and the pose he's got going, and also the level I was. So another big thing with wildlife is always getting really nice and eye level, or getting an angle that someone else would never normally do. So if you could do anything different rather than just standing up, then you're probably going to do quite well. So if you can get right above it, you can get below it. You know, people want to see what they haven't seen. So if you get yourself into a very weird, uncomfortable position, like lying in the snow dead flat for hours on end, you're going to get an image that's more personal, more different. Yeah, people are going to click with it a lot quicker. So I don't always shoot snow stuff, and I do like to play around. This is taken on my farm, and this photo took 3 months to get. And it took a hell of a lot of organizing and things like that. So I had to build a scaffold out in the bush, and then I had to build my own camera trap, which I have here. It's like a whole Zoom meeting on its own. But
is this the $10,000 you stick in a tree and leave there for months?
Yeah, that's the one. So these are my flash holders. I learned quite quickly on that duct taping a flash to a tree is really awkward because you can't get the batteries out and you can't adjust it very easy. These things is a bit of plumbing pipe, and then you can pull the cap off the back. You can latch out really easy. The batteries, bim bam boom. These are all, I think they use Wi-Fi, the little receivers on them. And these things, just between you and me, Chris, Nikon should make more of these. This is the SB28. Nikon hasn't made this in decades, I don't think. But these things are rare as hen's teeth now, because every camera trapper in the world wants SB28s. Purely for the reason that these things hold a battery charge for weeks. They just don't go flat. So they'll go to sleep, but they can fire straight from sleep, whereas other flashes can't, and they won't hold a battery. So they're old, but they do a really good job. So I generally have about 3 of those. And then I've got these gooseneck things from the States. You can kind of bend them however you want, and then you can clip them to a tree and then direct your light source however you want. So it's nice, quick, it's flexible. The camera trap. So this is a Pelican box. And the lens, hold on, I'll stop screen sharing there. There we go, is that better? So that's the lens there. And that's a filter that I've glued into the plastic. So I bought this lovely $200 Pelican box, and then I just drilled a hole straight through it and glued the filter into it. And then I took another filter, smashed the glass out of it, and attached that to that filter. Has a nice little roof. as well. And then, so the whole thing's weather sealed now. And if you're wondering why it's camouflaged to hide it from wildlife, it's not. It's to hide it from people who might want to, you know, go and pull the stuff out of it. I've also soundproofed it. So the whole thing's lined with foam, and then it's got a D810 in there. It's got a motorcycle battery, which hooks into the camera, and that'll run it for a week. And then I have a 16 to 35 mil in there. And then the whole thing's on this big Arca Swiss plate. I don't know if you can see that. So I'll just put this down. So the thing with that camera trap is I didn't want to have the lens exposed to the outside at all. And I wanted the whole thing to be contained within the box, weather sealed completely. So the reason the filter is glued into it is that you put the lens in, screw it on, and then the last half turn, you slide the camera body in, locks into the lens, and then you reach in and then the whole thing is connected. There's no space in between the filter and the outside or anything like that. So you're not shooting through glass or anything like that. You're shooting through a proper filter. There's no air gaps. There's no moisture that's going to get in there. Yeah. So that's another big problem is lenses fogging up. So with the cold and the wet, your lenses will fog up. And once they do fog up, there's no real bloody way to unfog them, especially your viewfinder. That's an absolute nightmare when that fogs up. So the thing I've been doing recently is if I know it's going to be a really wet, sort of rainy, sleety day, I take out the two camera bodies and my 70-200, 500 mil, and I put them in an esky with ice bricks, and they go in the car all the way up there in ice bricks. So they acclimatize all the way up to the mountain. And then when I go to get them out, they are already cold. And then when they come back in the truck, they go back in the esky. So I wipe them down, put them back in the esky so they stay cold. And then when I get them out again, we're not fogged up. Yeah, so it's a massive pain in the ass, but that's working quite well. Yeah. And we'll go back to screen sharing. Yeah, so this image is set up with a camera trap. So this is 3 flashes. The most important flash here is the back light. And a lot of people don't do that with the camera trap. They don't use a backlight, but you really need that backlight to separate the animal from the background. And you see that little rim glow on the glider's tails there. That's really important. So I picked out this holo out of the other million trees on the farm because I could see scratches on it. I could see where they've been feeding, and I spent weeks sitting out there in the dark watching them. And then I set up the entire camera trap to focus on this one holo with this whole image in mind. So this is a 30-second exposure. And the reason the gliders are so sharp is because I've put them sort of in line with the background there rather than with the sky. So the flashes go off straight away. That freezes the image of the gliders, and then everything just goes black. And then the camera is left to just take in the ambient light, which is the moonlight that's going on in the background there, and that's why the trees are all blurry, but the gliders are sharp. So just playing around with things like that. But if you saw it in the bush is scaffolding, and then you have to stand on a ladder, and then I was going out every 2 days and changing 24 batteries on this setup, you know, because the gliders would just go back and forth all the time. Yeah, so it just, you get a stack of images every night that, you know, because you're just sort of dealing with luck in a way. It's, yeah, it's a bit hit and miss what you're going to get, but, you know, you hedge your bets and hopefully it works out. So I'd like to do a lot more camera trapping. But the reason I showed this image and the wombat is because those two images both went to the Australian Geographic Awards, and then they both got picked up by different media organizations like the BBC and another company that did the Magical Land of Oz. So I was contacted within 2 weeks to go and do natural documentaries. So the BBC contacted me and they said, "We saw your wombat in the snow image. Could we film that?" And I said, "Yes, we can. How much are you going to pay me?" And they said, "Lots." And I said, "Very good." So we did that, and it was a nightmare. I spent 7 weeks straight sitting in snow, learning wombats behavior. Yeah. So I made friends with 13 different individuals. I can recite every single one of them for you right now if you'd like, but I probably won't. Yeah. So we did that, and we shot the kangaroos in the snow, and then we shot the wombats in the snow. And then from there, I got sent up north to film crocodiles eating bats. That was also quite hectic, sitting on a little raft that we made out of 40-gallon drums and plywood and having 10 crocodiles around your feet every morning. Yeah, so I think the point I'm trying to get in is those two images, although they were great and they got me awards, they also went on to add to extra things and things I didn't even expect, and whole avenues in my career that I didn't even expect to go down. And now I'm doing a nature documentary at least once a year, and it's become a bit of a big chunk of my business. So
do you think a big part of that is because you shoot for yourself and not shoot for other people's tastes as such?
Yeah, I do actually. It's so I probably should have explained how I actually make a living. So the core of my business is selling fine art prints, which is probably not the norm, but I think I probably do better than most wildlife photographers in Australia because of it. So my prints aren't cheap, but they're all limited editions, and I have a very strong sort of moral code on that, and I believe that I shouldn't be selling just posters. They need to be a limited edition. And the thing I go off with that is if anyone knows John Gould, he's the first sort of ornithologist who started doing Australia's birds. That guy was a marketing genius. He did 250 sets of books called The Birds of Australia, all limited edition. And now like a single page from one of Gould's books can sell up to $20,000. And he did limited editions. His wife painted them. He pioneered fine art, limited edition, natural history. So when I buy art, I buy Gould pages. Yeah. So that's the big one. So yeah, I make most of my living is just off selling fine art prints. The magazine stuff, it's nice. It looks great. It's good ego stroking, but it pays virtually nothing. It's good advertising, but you could not live off magazine stuff these days. It's an absolute.
Do you find the magazine, the PR from the magazine shot drives people towards your prints?
It does and it doesn't. Yeah, it's quite hit and miss because again, it's if you see it in a magazine, it's almost the same as just seeing it online. What it does is it gives you more credibility as a professional artist. And there's a few things that will do that. Having a gallery will give you a lot of credibility. Having a good website will give you a lot of credibility. Winning awards is another one. Having your stuff in magazines is really good. Yeah. Having a company like Nikon behind you, that's a good start too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those things
you earn.
What's that?
They're all things that you earn. You can't.
Yeah. They're all things that you earn, and they all add to you presenting yourself as someone who's worth buying a picture of. You know, it gives value to the products that you're presenting. So the documentary work, I couldn't make a living off that either. It's just a fun thing to do on the side. But yeah, most of what I do is just selling prints, and that's the main thing. Yeah.
And if they weren't limited editions, you couldn't sell them for the price you sell them for?
Oh, you could, but yeah, for me, it's about doing what's right by the client, you know. And the other thing about making something a limited edition is it pushes me to want to work harder. You know, like the Wombat's sold out now. I'm done with that. So I have to go out there and take something better. So it gives me a push to do better as well. Yeah. So I can always go out and take new images. And I relish the idea of going out and taking new images. And really just pushing
wait for the weather to turn bad.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't want to go out today because it was just sunny. It was too nice. And as soon as everyone jumps on Instagram and they're like, "Oh, it's Bluebird, it's wonderful," I'm just the Grinch sitting at home going, nah. I need it to be depressing. I need people to be driving the other way. What other images have I got here? Yeah, so this is filming for Seven Worlds. There's that old motto that you shouldn't work with animals or kids, but it's actually you shouldn't work with producers. Learned that the hard way. But it was a fun shoot. And you can see there it was an absolute struggle every day. So that camera that Dan's using down there, that thing weighs, probably weighs about 15 kilos on its own. The tripod weighs about 25. So we were carrying, with all the gear, we were probably carrying about 50 kilos up and down the hill every day in snow that would just sink up to your crutch if you took a wrong step. But we saw all sorts of things. We saw wombats walking across that ice. We saw wombats falling into crevasses. We saw little baby wombats and little mummy wombats. And I saw so much drama in those 13 wombats, especially from one called Phil. I've started writing a kid's book called The Sagas of Phil, but it's kind of breached the PG line after Phil hooked up with his new missus and had a de facto child and pissed off his ex-wife and left his orphan child. Yeah, it just got out of hand. So yeah, you could say I have a lot of time on my hands sometimes.
So this is Seven Worlds.
Just Seven Worlds. This is Eric. This was the day I took out just the 24 mil, and this is at a campsite. So these rears are pretty habituated. So another thing is that I don't just go out to find a animal or any animal. I go out to find the animal. So it usually comes down to an individual. So the lyrebirds I shoot, it's only one lyrebird, and it's the only lyrebird I know of in the entire country that gets snowed on and that'll let me get close to it. The wombats, the main wombat I photograph is Phil. I know him pretty well. You can pick him out. This is Eric. I know him pretty well. So it's figuring out where all these animals live, figuring out what their behaviors are, looking at the weather and looking at where all those things are just going to come together. So people might say it's luck, but it's not so much luck as it's more working out every single variability you can and just getting as much knowledge together as you can, that when those conditions line up, you can just go out, hedge your bets, and that's going to work. So the other day when I went out and I found that pink robin, which I didn't even know was there, I saw it. I looked at my girlfriend, I might have sworn something, and then ran off on her for 3 hours. That whole time I was watching what that robin was doing, where he was going, what branches he liked to land on. If there was patterns, I'm always looking for patterns. So where is the animal going? What is it eating? Is it repeating a behavior? What time is it doing that? What's the weather doing? What does it do when the sun comes out? Where do they go when the wind picks up? All these things. The more knowledge you can get about your subject, the more chance you've got of figuring out how to get that really amazing image. And then going out and repeating. Yeah. So when people tell me I'm talented, I kind of cringe a little bit because I might have a little bit of skill with the camera, but most of it is just blunt perseverance, just working at it, working at it, working at it, working at it until it bloody works. And I think anybody can do this. You just need to be so bloody stubborn that you don't give up until you get what you want. You will get it eventually.
So how much do you think these animals know who you are? Because you've built up a database of them. Do they recognize you, and are they comfortable with you when you come out?
I think they get a bit vague on things, especially this kangaroo, because bloody he's been on Instagram so many times with every bloody tourist who comes through, especially international snowboarders. They all come to this one spot because, you know, the local reps all know it as well, and they'll take them there to meet a kangaroo and they'll all get a selfie with it and everything. But yeah, some of the animals do, like the dingoes. They're incredibly smart. They know what's going on. That's a problem though, because they learn my smell, so the game gets harder, especially with those animals, because you're hunting something that is hunting something else. So you have to be just that much better, and it's just an endless game of cat and mouse. But that's fun. I like that.
Yeah. And do you have a trick with the dingoes to make them feel comfortable?
Or not so much comfortable, but yeah, there's a few things you can do with dingoes. You can use the prey calls, or you can act like an intruder. So I have sort of a repertoire of animal noises I will make while I'm out.
You know where I'm going with this, don't you?
Yeah, you want me to howl, don't you? So the other day I was in Namadgi with my girlfriend, and we heard this dingo calling, and I started to call back to it, and we just had this sort of repertoire going on between it, and then there was dingoes going off in every which direction. And we walked back down this bushfire trail, and there was the most nervous bushwalker ever walking up the other way. And all he'd heard was these dingoes going off everywhere around him. But yeah, getting the animal noises right is really hard. It's a good thing my garden is 5,000 acres, because people might think I'm a bit weird when I practice. So, you know, kangaroos, they have their sort of, and they have a whole lot of other noises. And if you want to get their attention, a really high pitch whistle will just cut through them, and they'll all put their heads up. More importantly, they'll put their ears forward, which is when you want the photo, like with Eric. But the dingoes, so when you hear on TV, you hear a howl with a dingo, it has a break in it, and it kind of dips. So a dingo is sort of, whereas a dingo it's more sort of like an O. So it's, oh, and you have to hold that pitch as loud as you can, as long as you can. And next thing you know, you've got a dingo behind the rock in front of you. So yeah, it can be quite funny, especially when you've got a bushwalker down the road who doesn't have any idea what's going on.
And does that allow you to get some great photos of them?
It does, yeah. Yeah. So you sort of have to work out what your photo is. So if you want the animal coming towards you, the chances are it's going to be a portrait shot, or it's going to be just the animal. Like with this one, it's just going to be Eric. Whereas the photo I want this white dingo killing a kangaroo in the snow, because that's not a hard thing at all. But I can't let her know that I'm there, and I have to be in the spot where she's going to make the kill as well. So it's figuring out, going in the valley, looking where the pack is, seeing where the kangaroos are, seeing where the features are in the landscape, and working out where they're going to push them and where they're going to make the kill, and then having to put myself there, but just a little ways back, so they don't see me as well. And I've come quite close a few times, but it's just blunt perseverance. Another thing I should probably say is the mentality I go out with every day is not to take photos to sell, but I go out every day with the thought in my head to win awards. I go out to try and take a photo that's different, and I go out to take a photo that's going to win a competition. So that Praise to the Rain image, that's one of my best sellers as well. And it won the Black and White Award and the Australian Geographic Awards. And ever since then, I have been in that awards every single year. And every year I try and push to take images that are going to win awards. And if they're going to win awards, they're going to sell. So like my exposure, I just expose for the white. With my photos, I just shoot for the awards. And everything that falls from that, the documentaries, the print sales, the magazine stuff, is all just fall out from that mentality of just shooting to win awards. And that probably comes from the snowboarding background. I get very competitive. But it's good. It pushes you to shoot differently. It pushes you to not copy other people. Yeah, I place a high value on my individuality, and I could not stand to be shooting the same thing as someone else.
So how do you get your inspiration then? So is your inspiration formed from other people's images, or is it maybe your grandfather's paintings?
So there's a little bit of it sort of from painters. Like, I really admire painters all the time. They think of an image rather than painting an image. So there's a guy called William T. Cooper. He passed away about 3 years ago, and he was the next guy after Gould. If you haven't seen his paintings, you should. His compositions are amazing. They're just so on point. So William T. Cooper. And David Attenborough collects his stuff very avidly. But that guy, he would paint a picture, and they obviously did a documentary on him. And if his composition wasn't working out, he'd get a bit of sandpaper and just take to it. And you see this whole painting just disappear before your eyes. He'd just destroy it. And then he'd go back and he'd paint on a clear film, and he'd match it up and see if the composition would work again. And his wife would go out, and she was a botanist, and she'd collect the plants for him. So he got everything right. And then it was always about the animal and its environment. So things like that, you know, leading lines, the environment, weather, behavior, those sort of things you can draw from a lot. And then also looking at images, other images, you know, like looking at wedding photos. Wedding photographers do some cool stuff. You know, like they'll backlight rain and just make it go pop, or they'll isolate a bride, or do all sorts of great things. And fashion as well, they'll do that as well. And I sort of have a saying for small towns, like, because I live in a small town, is if you take something that does really well in a city and take it to a small town, you will absolutely kill it. And if you take something that does really well in fashion or weddings or a different genre of photography, and you take it to wildlife and do something different, then I think people will take to that really well as well. So yeah, when I shot that wombat, I was kind of thinking more bride, because I'd shot a few weddings with my brother-in-law before that, and using the 50mm at 2.8, that's the same thing as you'd use on a bride walking down an aisle or something like that. So taking inspiration from other genres is a really good idea, rather than just looking at other wildlife photographers. Yeah. Should we do some Q&A?
Yeah, let's do some Q&A. So does video feature in what you're doing here? Do you shoot video is the question.
Yes, I do shoot video. I wouldn't say I'm great at it, but I think I've put myself in some pretty good environments where I can capture some great things. So Seven was the first time I shot video. And I got a lot of shots in. So that was definitely a big boost to my confidence doing that. Yeah. But shooting video for wildlife is not like shooting video for other things. So I've been shooting with a couple of blokes who work for Netflix recently, and they specialize in shooting people, and the way they shoot is completely different to the way the natural history people shoot. So they have a story in mind and they can shoot to it, and they can make whatever they want happen. Whereas with wildlife, you get a rough script, and you just try your best to try and get those shots, and you try and get them out of order or whatever, because you don't really have a choice. The animals will just do whatever the animals do.
I've often wondered that with those documentaries you see, it looks like everything's all shot in sequence almost, but clearly there's a whole heap of just footage that's then put together to make a sequence.
Yeah, if I told you the complete bones of it, you'd probably never want to watch another nature documentary again. But I told my girlfriend, and she just ruined it for her completely. But yeah, basically, you're given a script from someone in England who's never even seen the animal or knows anything about it, and they tell you what they want or what they think the story is, and then you try and shoot as many shots that will fit into that narrative as you can. Yeah, you kind of make a collage. You know, those collages you get of 100 different photos that make someone's face.
Mm-hmm.
That's nature documentaries in one picture right there. It's just a mishmash of shots and make one image.
It seems very counterproductive, counterintuitive, because to me, I want to capture and see the animal like you did with the wombat. And to me, the story might be chasing the footprints or seeing the footprints, seeing the thing in the distance, and then seeing the thing coming towards you and eventually potentially going around you. To me, that's the story, and that's the story I want to tell. But as someone who's trying to get content, I would prefer to leave that to you and say, you're the expert here. You capture the essence of this beast, of this animal.
Yeah, and I think back in the day, that's how it was. You know, when David Attenborough started, they were just complete cowboys. They just went out and just shot whatever they could, you know. And that was great because everything they shot had never been shot. So it was a first. But now, you know, you have a budget for a big nature doco, and you have to really make that budget work. You can't afford for the story not to work. And you could send two guys out there just to film hippos for a year, and they would back nothing except farting and belching, you know. But, you know, if you told them to go out and, you know, there's a baby hippo and it walks over there and it gets sad and then it walks back over to his mum, and then you give them something that they can sort of aim for, then you know what story you're going to get, you know what you can budget for, and you know how practical it is that you're going to get it. Yeah. So
one of the questions in the chat here is exactly about this. It's from Jane. When you shoot your documentaries, do you have help or guidance from the experts like scientists, e.g. for the croc doco you did?
Yeah, so that I'd like to say yes. That some. So the way your nature documentary works is you've got your hierarchy, you've got your head producer, and then you've got your normal producers under them, and then you've got researchers. And researchers just sit in an office and they sit on Instagram all day and they go out and they find the content, they find the stories, and then you get the producer, they knock them out of the way and say, right, we're going to make this story, and then the head producer signs off on it. Yeah, so that's basically the way that's happening. I've kind of forgotten the question, but
so they're creating a story for you, and you now have to go out and try and capture the content to fit that story.
Yeah, they create the story for you, and when we get scientists involved, so sometimes if you can't, like with pygmy possums, right? You can only really go to a scientist about them, but so I have an ecology degree, and I have a lot of mates who are academics as well, but they're quite analytical about the way they look at the behavior. So they're counting how many babies they have or what time they breed and things like that. They're not so much focused on the little behavioral things and the emotional things. They're just more after data. So if you go to a scientist, you will get information, but from there, it's up to you to do the creating part. So when they come to me, I think it's a bit of a boon for them because I'm already looking at it from an aesthetic point of view and from a behavioral point of view, rather than a scientist who is just like, it's over there. Yeah.
It's like, because you know the behavior of the animal, you've already created your own, in inverted commas, luck.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're a scientist, you're not so much bothered about the light or what time of the day is going to be best, or when you might get the best behavior that's going to be aesthetically appealing for the audience.
True.
So yeah, you need to pick where your information's coming from. At the end of the day, it's all about the flashbang, happy, wow. Yeah.
So what filters do you use? The question here is about polarizers.
I don't use any.
Don't use any? Yeah. Whatever it is.
No. I've got them. When you're filming, you use ND filters just to dumb down the light, because when you're shooting it for normal TV sort of stuff, you're shooting it 25 frames a second, so you're shooting at 1/50th of a second, and you want your aperture to be quite low as well, so you can get that nice sort of separation. So then you put the ND filters on so you can shoot at 1/50th of a second.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're always shooting double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 120 frames, you're shooting at 300th of a second, or 320th, or whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah. So no, I don't actually use filters. I don't have time to fiddle around with them. Yeah. It just, you get the gear out, you go. Yeah. And always use your lens hoods. Always.
Yes.
If I catch you not using your lens hood, I'll be very annoyed.
Okay. So what's one animal you've always wanted to capture but haven't yet captured? What's your dream animal that you want to capture?
The dream animal. Yeah, tricky one.
We spoke about this before, and you said the thylacine, I think, was one.
The thylacine. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Love thylacines.
Yeah.
Love them. Yeah. Yeah. I've got a skeleton in my house. Yeah. I think I told you that last time.
No, you didn't tell me that. You keep dropping things. You keep dropping things about David Attenborough, about Bear Grylls, and now you've dropped a thylacine skeleton.
You sent me a letter last week too. I told you that, isn't I? Yeah.
Mr. Who?
David.
Attenborough. There you go.
Yeah.
Just it's just so David Attenborough, it's no one important.
No, so we have a big erosion creek on our farm, and it's really cool in one way because it's eroded so much dirt that the bottom layer is 120,000 years old, and there's megafauna fossils all the way up it. So my grandfather found this. He thought it's a fox, but we dug it out, and it turned out to be a thylacine.
Wow.
Yeah, 10,000 years old, as you do. But my auntie's a paleontologist, so she pulled out a whole lot of diprotodons, giant macropod type kangaroos like Procroptodons, Tassie devils, marsupial lions, anacondas, like bigger than anaconda sized snakes,
Wow.
giant goannas, yeah, new species of kangaroo. Yeah.
So are these being scientists coming to your property to dig these up, or are they just ones that you guys are finding?
No, it's just ones that Angela dug up. She did a thesis on them, and yeah, we've left them ever since. But the downside of the erosion is that it's also just a shocking reminder of how badly we've treated the landscape with the farming. We're trying to make amends now by fixing up the farm as best we can. So when I'm not taking photos, I'm playing in the big garden, planting trees and trying to fix up the erosion and trying to deal with the weeds. Yeah.
Do the wild brumbies cause any of that? Are they a problem? You mentioned there was lots of them.
Yeah. Look, to be perfectly honest, I've made a good part of my living off the horses, but I would happily see them all gone tomorrow to save the park.
Okay.
Yeah, I think any farmer would look at it. The problem, it's super controversial, especially here. And I look at it from two sides. They are very beautiful, and they make an amazing photo, but they just don't belong in the park, and they're too heavy, and they're so out of place in that environment. They just, yeah. If the other thing is, even if they did try and remove every single one of them, they never would remove any of them, like every single one of them. they'll always be there.
Mm.
And I think the rarer something is, the more magical it becomes. So, yeah.
Do you require permits or permission from the national parks when you're in national parks taking photos, particularly to sell your photos on their property, from their property?
As a sole shooter in a national park, no, I don't need a permit for that. The national parks, I know them very well here and in Canberra, and they also sell my work. So I do gift cards, which are like my photos that you can put on your wall or send to a friend or whatever. They sell those. They sell my big prints as well. I have a good relationship with them. So yeah, they know what I do, and I try to help them out if I can. Yeah.
With just getting some technical stuff with the cameras. So autofocus modes, you're using continuous focus?
So I always use autofocus, but I only use single spot.
Okay.
Yeah, I never use 3D tracking or anything like that. I always use back button focus as well.
Okay.
The biggest problems for me, especially when you have falling snow, is the autofocus wants to lock on to every single snowflake. And the things I'm trying to shoot are always sort of obscured by a bush or obscured by snowflakes. So I go into single focus. I try and lock on and then get a few shots, and then I'll refocus and take a few shots. So I'll do it in bursts, and I always have it on continuous high. So I'll go bang, 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 refocus, bang, 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 refocus. Because usually things are happening so fast that you just need to get as many shots as you can and hope that some of them are going to be in focus, and just always aiming for the eye if you can, or as close to the head as you can. Yeah.
Which is like what the example that we see here, the eye is incredibly sharp.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's shot at 2.8, and there are snowflakes coming down, and he was moving, like he's not just standing there letting you take the photo, like
yeah, which has its own. So he's moving. You've got snowflakes falling in between you and the eye of the kangaroo. So focus becomes
like straight after that too.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I thought you were friends.
Yeah, well, we are, but friendly nudge between mates.
There is a question in here. What degree did you do? Science degree did you do again?
So I did a general science degree, and then I specialised in or majored in ecology. Yeah, nice. I've never used it. It's just the most expensive piece of paper I own. But I don't regret doing it. It whipped me into line. It was good, and I made a lot of good friends doing it. And yeah, I still work with Canberra Uni and the ANU on little projects. Yeah.
Nice. So what's next, Mr. Davis?
What's next? Yeah, I had someone ask me the other day what I'm going to do when I run out of critters in the snow, and I said, well, maybe I'll just do everything on the beach. I thought that sounded pretty good. It's like retirement to the coast. But I'm also doing another project where it's not racist. I'm just going to put that out there to begin with. But I'm only photographing white animals. So albino, leucistic, melanistic, loss of pigmentation. So I photographed a white crocodile in the Northern Territory last year, the only white saltwater crocodile that I know of. A white emu, white dingoes, and that's become the biggest game of Pokemon ever, because like the animals at home here, it's not just finding a animal, it's finding the animal. And a lot of these animals are the rarest of their kind, because there might only be one of them. There's only one white emu that I know about. There's only a handful of white kangaroos. It gets incredibly tricky. And then it's not just about getting a photo of it, it's getting a good photo of it. Like, it needs to look really good. But then to add another layer on it, most people don't get it. Like, if you see the white emu on its own, it just looks like a really awkward ostrich until you put it next to a normal emu, and then people, they get it. So you have to get that white emu next to the normal emu. I could probably show you that, actually.
Yeah, it's like when we see Migaloo go up the coast and we see the photos of all of these whales, and then there's Migaloo standing out like a fluorescent white whale.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's, oh wow.
Yeah, so like you can see here, he is white, but it's not till you stick him next to the normal emus that it makes sense. Yeah. So that's the tricky thing about this. And there was a white willy wagtail I was chasing yesterday, and that's hard because it's in suburbia, and it's a tiny bird, and it gets really awkward because it was in a school as well, and
you're walking around
looking the way I do,
balaclava and a beanie.
Yeah, with a camouflage lens, like you're just asking for trouble. It's just not a good situation, but that's just what you got to do because that's where he is. It's tricky. Yeah.
Well, I've never seen a white emu before.
No, so these animals, every time one of them turns up, and you would have all seen it. Every time someone spots a white animal, someone takes a photo, the press get a hold of it, they put it online, and everyone sees it online, and they go, "Wow!" But what if you do 20 together? So that's what I'm doing. The hardest thing is just figuring out a good name for the exhibition that doesn't sound incredibly bad, because White Australia's not going to fly. No.
And how many of these are there? Like here's an emu with Migaloo, the crocodile. Are white animals more common than what we think, and we don't take notice of them?
Yeah, they're relatively common as a genetic throwout, but they don't last very long. That's the problem, Like back when humpback whales used to be, and there used to be a lot of them, back in the 1700s or whatever. You might have had a lot of white whales, but yeah, because there are so few humpbacks these days, to see a white humpback, especially a big white male humpback, is quite a spectacular thing. But then you've got your Indigenous Americans, and they had the white bison, and that was an incredible rare thing for them. Yeah, and then like there's an Aboriginal story that my auntie dug up the other day, a Dreamtime story about a woman who had a white dingo, like a spirit dog. So they had stories about white dingoes as well. But yeah, so white dingoes pretty common. It depends what your depends what the genetic malfunction is as well, though. So like this emu is not albino. Albino is where you completely lose all your melanin, and it'll affect their eyesight. So the wallabies on Bruny Island, they're pretty much all albino, but this thing's leucistic, so it's still got melanin. His eyes are still fine. He's just predominantly white pigmentation or pale pigmentation, like the crocodile was.
Great in the snow.
Yeah, to get that white dingo on the snow killing kangaroos. That's
amazing. Let's go back to printing. So do you print for yourself?
No. So someone else told me pretty early on is that there's 3 major steps to a photo. There is taking the photo, editing the photo, printing the photo. I can do the first one. I'm pretty rubbish at the second one, and there's no way in hell I can do the third one. So printing, although most people might have a printer, to print big and print accurately is a real art in its own. So there's very few printers out there who can really do a good job, use the right paper, calibrate the printers, make sure everything is going to be on point, and make sure it's going to look exactly the way your screen looks when it prints as well. So I'm quite happy to farm that out to someone else, and I do, and the framing as well, because framing your own stuff is an absolute nightmare as well. Yeah, you need clean room, you need the materials, you need to accept the cost of wastage. Yeah, it's very expensive, and a printer that prints the images the size that I sell is going to set you back $15,000 to $20,000, and that's before you get into the inks or the paper. Yeah,
Wow.
it's big bucks. So yeah, ship it off to someone who actually does print. Yeah. And a good tip for a printer is don't use a printer who is also a photographer, because you will come to blows with them at some stage. just take it from me. Yeah.
So do you only print your limited edition prints?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. And how do we go about buying one of those? Is that they are only sold through your website, or are they in galleries?
So I have them. So I've sort of here in the mountains. So because it's a very tourist orientated area, I have them in a couple bakeries, and I have them in a cafe, and I have them in the national parks offices and the visitor centre. And people can come through and buy them straight off the wall there. But generally, they just send me an email, and I send them back the price list, and we just go from there. I do have a new website about to launch with an actual internet shop, and I'm quite embarrassed that I don't have a proper online shop yet, but I'm still making a living out of it. So yeah, I'm not that sad about the situation.
Imagine the living you could make if you had a proper online store. We look forward to that, Charles.
Oh, I'm definitely not tapping the potential of my business. No, not at all yet. But yeah, I look forward to it. It'll be good.
I'm just going to make a comment here. Gertie's just asking about the salt spray being on the coast with those lens covers. My answer would be yes. Just get them, because any protection you can get over the top of any of your gear, particularly with salt, just grab them. For sure.
Yeah, just clean down your lenses every time you take it out. Like if you lick it and it tastes salty, then you probably need to clean your lens.
Yeah. And make sure no one's there to take a photo of you licking your lens.
Nah, you get them to do that, because that's good advertising for Nikon.
We just an industry tip. We use Mr. Sheen. So we'll often do events like the World Rally Championship, and our cameras will be just brown, covered in mud. We clean them, but we use Mr. Sheen as a product. And what it does is it cleans it. It helps bring the product back to a nice shiny black, but it also puts a nice protective sort of coat over the top as well. So just get a Mr. Sheen, a house brush, cut the bristles off a little bit, and spray the camera over the whole camera. Not so much that you drown it, but just spray it. And use the house brush just to wipe and wipe off any of the dirt, and then just get a nice cleaning cloth and a nice soft cleaning cloth, and just wipe the body down. And it's a wonderful way to protect your camera, but also just to clean it at the same time. Please do not do that with the lens off and allow the Mr. Sheen to get onto the sensor and inside the camera. But certainly around the outside, the extremities of the camera, and you'll have them looking brand new. They look, once you do that, everything just shines again. They look amazing.
Yeah, it's good idea to learn how to clean your own gear. Actually, I won't say cleaning your own sensors, but yeah,
no.
learning to clean, bits of it. It's quite important. Yeah. And those lens coat covers, they come in a whole range of colors as well. So you don't need white camouflage, which looks really awkward in a schoolyard. Yeah.
So, Mr. Davis, any parting last words, comments, things you'd like to make?
Always shoot manual, always shoot raw, take a lot of photos, and take the photos you want to take. And if there's a rule, break it, because you're guaranteed to show someone they haven't seen before. Yeah, you'll show them something different. So all good advice. Yeah, everything you've talked about tonight has actually been amazing about seeing things differently. And I know that the idea of seeing a print and seeing an image large is so different to what we're seeing now. We're seeing a lot of images on small devices, on small screens. But then, as you said, if you can see a large print, a large image, and you feel like you can walk into that image and touch it, it does create a sense of wow. And I think it also adds to the impact of the image. Yeah, print your images, make them real. Print it, give it to a family member as a present. Yeah. And if you want to start selling them, approach a local business and see if you can get them one on a wall, and yeah, that's a good way to start moving forward. But you know, you just
I had to put my beanie on in support of you, mate. I know we talked about wearing beanies all night tonight, and I forgot to put mine on. So appreciate it.
I feel like I'm gonna have to start suing you for breaching my trademark.
I had a shave, so we're different. But
That's all right.
look, we could talk all night. You and I can do that. There's a request here. Stephanie wants to see some more photos. So, best place for people to go to see more images of yours?
On my Facebook or on my Instagram. That's the best way to do it. You can also look at Instagram without owning an account as well. If you didn't know that, you can just jump on Google and go Charles Davis Photography Instagram. Mm-hmm. The website, just keep an eye on it because it should be updating in a couple of weeks. And yeah, that'll be good.
Tell us your Instagram handle.
It's just Charles Davis Photography.
Okay, great. Yeah, and that's your website as well?
Yeah.
I'll be sending a link to everyone for those, for your Instagram and your website. So no need to write that down at the moment. Charles, as always, amazing, wonderful talking to you. I look forward to a chance when we can, when I can cross the border and come down and see you and spend some time on the farm. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I'm going to take this off because I feel a bit silly. It's always a pleasure talking to you. For everyone else that's been here tonight, I really appreciate you listening to us. It's been wonderful. We do these shows usually 3 nights a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights. We've got some incredible content and incredible photographers. We always try and mix up the content. So if you can fill out that survey form, that'll help us shape these courses. If you also have recommendations for the next lot of courses, please also reply back to us or reply back to my email that I'll send you through tonight. So once again, Charles, thank you very much. You're amazing. It's a lovely pleasure to talk to you again. And for everyone else, have a wonderful night. Be safe. And we'll see you at the next Nikon School Online. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charles.
No, you're most welcome.